Hello and welcome to CVR News Network. You're watching CVR English World 360 and these are the details. President Putin has reacted to President Trump's call to spare Ukrainian lives in Russia's Kursk region, saying Kiev's troops will be spared if they lay down their arms. We are sympathetic to President Trump's call, Putin said in televised remarks. If they lay down their arms and surrender, they will be guaranteed life and dignified treatment, said Russia's Putin.
Что было практически сведено к нулю, уничтожено прежней американской администрацией. Процесс этот непростой, если не сказать сложный, но тем не менее, как всем хорошо известно, и у меня состоялся телефонный разговор с президентом Трампом. Состоялись первые контакты нашего министра иностранных дел со своим американским коллегой, и помощник президента России Ушаков встречался со своими визави. Так что в целом ситуация как бы начинает двигаться. Посмотрим, что из этого получится. Прежде чем начать работу, хотел бы сказать, что мы ознакомились с сегодняшним обращением президента США господина Трампа пощадить жизни военнослужащих украинской армии, части которой заблокированы российскими войсками в зоне вторжения ВСУ в Курскую область. В этой связи обращаем внимание, что украинские боевики совершили в зоне вторжения многочисленные преступления против гражданского населения. Эти деяния, как я уже говорил, квалифицируются Генеральной прокуратурой Российской Федерации как терроризм. Вместе с тем, мы с пониманием относимся к призыву президента Трампа руководствоваться в отношении этих военнослужащих соображениями гуманитарного характера. В этой связи подчеркну, что в случае сложения оружия и сдачи в плен им будет гарантирована жизнь и достойное обращение в соответствии с нормами международного права и законами Российской Федерации. Для эффективной реализации призыва президента США необходим соответствующий приказ военно-политического руководства Украины своим воинским подразделениям сложить оружие, что было практически сведено к нулю, уничтожено прежней американской администрацией. Процесс этот непростой, если не сказать сложный, но тем не менее, как всем хорошо известно, и у меня состоялся телефонный разговор с президентом Трампом. Состоялись первые контакты нашего министра иностранных дел со своим американским коллегой, и помощник президента России Ушаков встречался со своими визави. Так что в целом ситуация как бы начинает двигаться. Посмотрим, что из этого получится. Прежде чем начать работу, хотел бы сказать, что мы ознакомились с сегодняшним обращением президента США господина Трампа пощадить.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that he and his US counterpart Donald Trump discussed an energy strike ceasefire with Russia during their talks on Wednesday. Ukraine would draw up a list of facilities that could be subject to be partial ceasefire brokered by the United States, he said during a viral news conference. That list could include not only energy but also rail and port infrastructure, Zelensky said a day after Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke to Trump and agreed to pause attacks on energy infrastructure. Zelensky said he and Trump also discussed only on vast Russia-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in southeastern Ukraine during their phone call. He added that he told Trump that Kiev would be ready to discuss US involvement in modernizing and investing in the nuclear plant if it is returned to Ukraine. These were the first talks between Zelensky and Trump since their disastrous Oval Office talks late last month. The Ukrainian leader said Wednesday talks were probably the most substantive conversation over the recent period.
Щодо часткового припинення вогню від американської сторони ми отримали сигнали, що скоріш за все мова йдеться про енергетичну тишу.
We received signals from the American side that most likely involves energy silence ceasefire, meaning no strikes on the energy infrastructure of both countries. as well as civilian infrastructure. Here, I told President Trump that civil infrastructure is a very comprehensive concept. We agreed that we will do everything from our side to prepare a list of objects that we consider priorities and what we consider civilian infrastructure. This can include different types of infrastructure, such as railways. We will talk about port infrastructure. I don't know what our partners will confirm, but we will prepare for this meeting in Saudi Arabia. As for additional demands from the U.S., I told you, no, there were none.
До цієї зустрічі в Саудівській Аравії. Так, це що стосується додаткових вимог, я вам сказав ні. Передусім, я ще раз хочу
First of all, I want to emphasize to you very honestly, the issue of territories will be the most difficult. I feel this, we understand this. It will be a challenge for all of us. We will defend Ukraine to the maximum on these matters, but it will be very difficult for us. President Trump understands that legally we do not recognize any territories as Russian.
І сьогодні. Від мене абсолютно він розуміє, що юридично ми не визнаємо ніякі території. І питання, чи спроможні ми відновити цю станцію.
The question was whether we are capable of restoring this plant. We discussed this. In my opinion, I said that just the plant itself is not enough. There must be appropriate infrastructure, water supply, and also technical personnel. And there are many steps to take for the plant to start generating money and, above all, electricity for the people in 1.5-2-2.5 years. This is my vision. President Trump asked if there is an understanding that America could restore it. I told him this. If it's possible to modernize, invest money, etc., we are ready to discuss it with you. But we only spoke about one plant, which is under temporary Russian.
Наступні кроки, вимог щодо часткового припинення вогню. Від американської сторони ми отримали сигнали, що, скоріш за все, мова йдеться про енергетичне.
We received signals from the American side that most likely involves energy silence, ceasefire, meaning no strikes on the energy infrastructure of both countries, as well as civilian infrastructure. Here, I told President Trump that civil infrastructure is a very comprehensive concept. We agreed that we will do everything from our side to prepare a list of objects that we consider priorities and what we consider civilian infrastructure. This can include different types of infrastructure, such as railways. We will talk about port infrastructure. I don't know what our partners will confirm, but we will prepare for this meeting in Saudi Arabia. As for additional demands from the U.S., I told you, no, there were none.
До цієї зустрічі в Саудівській Аравії. Так, це що стосується додаткових вимог, я вам сказав ні. Передусім, ще раз, я хочу.
First of all, I want to emphasize to you very honestly, the issue of territories will be the most difficult. I feel this, we understand this. It will be a challenge for all of us. We will defend Ukraine to the maximum on these matters, but it will be very difficult for us. President Trump understands.
Israel's military said it intercepted a missile launched from Yemen early on Thursday as hostilities with Iran-backed Houthi militants intensified. Yemen's Houthi militants, undeterred by the waves of U.S. strikes since last week, fired a ballistic missile towards Ben Gurion Airport near Tel Aviv, the group's military spokesperson said in a televised statement. Iran's military said it intercepted a missile launched from Yemen early on Thursday as hostilities with the Houthis intensified amid U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to punish Iran over its perceived support for the Yemeni militant group. Sirens sounded across several areas in Israel after the projectile was fired, the military said. The Israeli police said sirens were heard in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Israel's ambulance service said no serious injuries were reported.
الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية.
The missile force of the Yemeni armed forces carried out a qualitative military operation targeting Ben Gurion Airport in the occupied Jaffa region with a Palestine II hypersonic ballistic missile. This operation successfully achieved its objective. Thanks be to Allah, for the fifth day in a row, our armed forces, with the help of Allah Almighty, continue to effectively and responsibly confront the American aggression against Yemen, the land of faith and wisdom, which has targeted civilian objects and facilities in the capital, Sana'a, and several other governorates over the past few hours. As a result, the armed forces have escalated their targeting of enemy warships in the Red Sea, including the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Harry Truman and its affiliated warships.
Plumes of smoke and fire have been seen billowing above the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, following the reports from Houthi media about multiple USA strikes targeting the rebel-held areas in Yemen. The United States launched heavy strikes against the Houthi rebel group starting on Saturday, marking a significant escalation on the ongoing conflict. These attacks sparked the widespread protest across the war-torn country, which demonstrates condemning the U.S. intervention. In response, retaliatory attacks have been launched against the shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, further intensifying the regional tensions. The violence underscores the deepening crisis in Yemen, where the war has already caused immense suffering and instability. Smoke was seen rising from the northern Gaza, visible from Israel, as the region experienced another wave of 8 strikes. According to Gaza Civil Defense, 13 people were reported dead following the Israeli attacks, which began just after midnight. The ongoing violence has resulted in significant casualties, further escalating the tensions in the already volatile region. The strikes come as a part of the continued military operations, which have led to widespread destruction and the loss of life. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is deteriorating, with increasing concerns over the civilian safety and the impact of the conflict on the local population. As the violence persists, international calls for de-escalation and a renewed focus on peace efforts continue to grow. In Argentina's capital, retirees, football fans, unions, and activists have come together for another day of protest against President Javier Milei's budget-slashing policies. This follows a violent day of demonstrations last week. Protests are objecting government's fiscal measures, which many believe disappropriately affect vulnerable groups, including pensioners. To prevent protesters from reaching the Congress, dozens of security force trucks, water cannons, and metal barriers have been deployed. Tensions remain high as citizens continue to challenge the government austerity policies, with both retirees and passionate football fans taking part in ongoing demonstrations. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended former President Donald Trump's recent criticism of a judge who demanded more details regarding deportation flights. Leavitt argued that some judges are acting as partisan activists, attempting to slow walk the administration agenda. She condemned the rulings that have hindered Trump's policies on deportations and other issues, calling them unacceptable. Leavitt's defense comes as tensions rise between executive branch and the judiciary over the immigration related to legal challenges. The White House continues to stand by Trump's position, framing these judicial decisions as obstacles to the administration's goals.
Americans can absolutely expect to see the continuation of the mass deportation campaign that has been successfully led by this president, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, and also our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Since you brought up the judges, I would like to point out that the judges in this country are acting erroneously. We have judges who are acting as partisan activists from the bench. They are trying to dictate policy from the President of the United States. They are trying to clearly slow walk this administration's agenda, and it's unacceptable. As the president said last night, we will continue to comply with these court orders. We will continue to fight these battles in courts. But it's incredibly apparent that there is a concerted effort by the far left to judge shop, to pick judges who are clearly acting as partisan activists from the bench in an attempt to derail this president's agenda. We will not allow that to happen. And not only are they usurping the will of the president and the chief executive of our country, but they are undermining the will of the American public, tens of millions of Americans who duly elected this president to implement the policies that are coming out of this White House. Well, look, the president has made it clear that he believes this judge in this case should be impeached, and he has also made it clear that he has great respect for the Chief Justice John Roberts, and it's incumbent upon the Supreme Court to rein in these activist judges. These partisan activists are undermining the judicial branch by doing so. We have co-equal branches of government for a reason, and the president...
Ukrainian President Zelensky has called on Kiev's allies to ramp up their support for Ukraine, particularly in the face of Russian President Vladimir Putin's demand that the West stop providing military and intelligence aid. During a press conference with the Finnish President Alexander Stubb, Zelensky emphasized that he does not believe any concessions should be made regarding the assistance to Ukraine. Instead, he stressed that Ukraine's allies should increase their support to help the country withstand the ongoing Russian aggression. Zelensky's remark come as the war in Ukraine continues to intensify, with Kiev seeking to secure more resources to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Він хоче, щоб ми не отримували інформацію, коли летить балістика по українським цивільним, тому що балістикою вони б'ють по цивільній інфраструктурі, значить він хоче, щоб ми не знали цих атак, а значить, щоб наші люди не йшли в бомбосховище. Тобто це все говорить про продовження війни. Тому я не вважаю, що треба йти на будь-які поступки щодо допомоги на Україні, а навпаки, треба посилювати допомогу Україні, тому що це сигнал, що Україна готова до будь-яких сюрпризів. Він хоче, щоб ми не отримували інформацію, коли летить балістика по українським цивільним, тому що балістикою вони б'ють по цивільній інфраструктурі, значить він хоче, щоб ми не знали цих атак, а значить, щоб наші люди не йшли в бомбосховище. Тобто це все говорить про продовження війни. Тому я не вважаю, що треба йти на будь-які поступки щодо допомоги на Україні, а навпаки.
Russia has welcomed back 372 of its soldiers who returned in a prisoner swap with Ukraine. The exchange, brokered by United Arab Emirates, was confirmed by the Kremlin on Tuesday. The swap comes after talks between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Putin. The return of these prisoners of war makes significant development in the ongoing conflict, with the exchange symbolizing a rare moment of cooperation amid the broader tensions between the two nations. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged prisoners of war following a phone call between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, during which the prisoner swap was discussed. The swap was brokered by UAE and Russian defense ministers.
Еще в январе.
Aymara indigenous people took the streets of La Paz to protest the ongoing shortages of dollars and fuel that have been plaguing Bolivia. Dressed in traditional red ponchos and black hats, the protesters marched to Plaza Murillo, the site of the presidential palace, which was blocked off by riot police. The marchers carried a list of demands to present to government officials, highlighting the impact of Bolivar's economic crisis, which has been exacerbated by a severe shortage of US dollars. Since 2023, the country has faced significant economic challenges with its liquid international reserves nearby completed. This shortages has made it increasingly difficult to import fuel, which the government traditionally sells at subsidized prices for the domestic market. The protests reflect growing frustration over the government handling of the economy and the impact on daily life for the Bolivians. That's the end of the bulletin. Keep watching CVR News.